let us all do we can to build a better future.
So yeah, I just said earlier, I am hopping mad. I have been furious all afternoon. As I've been talking about on this show, probably for the past month, we've been talking a lot about the issue of freedom of speech. What is censorship? What is government censorship versus practical censorship? And who owns media platforms? Who owns the means of dissemination? Who owns the means of media creation? We've been talking a lot about that. Noted not so long ago that the supposedly progressive AOC was encouraging people who were on her campaign list to turn in media creators, content creators that are not in line with what she feels is progressive orthodoxy. And we began to see the great purges on Twitter and on YouTube and on Facebook of accounts. We saw demonetization, and as we noticed at the time, people have media habits, and when you start knocking people off these platforms, you begin to narrow the scope of news and opinions that people are receiving. Well, something happened on the 22nd of February, and this has actually been escalated. Two U.S. Congresspeople from California, we have Anna Eshoo and Jerry McKinney, who are on a high-ranking committee, decided to contact cable providers. And some people are making it out that they were threatening the cable providers. This is not actually what happened here, but there's a whole lot of plausible deniability in this letter, which was written on congressional letterhead. Congress of the United States, they were not approaching the cable companies as consumers, which they have a right to do if they're cable consumers. They sent this letter on congressional letterhead, and they basically said, the country is being overwhelmed with misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, and lies. And these are phenomena that undergird the radicalization of seditious individuals who committed acts of insurrection on January 6th. Oh my gosh. People were just inspired by the media, and solely apparently by the media, to go bum rushing Congress.
But Lanny, you have to remember, in America, before 2016, we had a perfect country. There was no crime. Nothing was wrong. There was no bigotry.
Racism was defeated.
Racism had been defeated for centuries, as far as I remember, even though civil rights.
And there was never a thing called yellow journalism.
No, never. No. It's not like we're reliving the 20s all over again. And it just so happens that every part of government is basically falling apart. People don't trust their government. People don't trust their neighbors. People are getting separated. Many things are keeping Americans apart. The American way of life is on the decline, but it's probably just Trump and Fox News.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. They are miffed at the cable companies. The cable companies are not really creating the news. They are platforms for the news. Now, it pains me deeply to defend cable companies because I think they're some of the most unethical organizations out there, given their business and billing practices. And that's, that's just, anybody who has had to deal with their cable bill. Anybody who's had to pay a cable bill, who has seen their cable amounts go up every month, and realizing that there, in many areas, you have very few choices when it comes to your cable company.
Can I say something on that real quick? So, this is something that's happening behind the scenes that it's there's kind of exactly to Laney's point. So, as you guys know, we have a very interesting relationship with Comcast of us paying about $200
I hate Comcast
a month for services that they're not actually delivering, since they're basically a monopoly in this area. And I've been contacted by someone from Comcast over the last 2 weeks who's like, hey, by the way, do you know that agreement that that 2-year agreement that you signed for the amount that you're paying? Well, it was technically promotional for the last few months. And if you don't basically sign another 2 years, we're going to increase your rates for the last couple months. So
yeah. As I said, so I'm hopping mad that I have to defend cable companies. I am equally hopping mad that I have to defend organizations like Newsmax, One American News Network, and Fox News. But guess what? Here we are. So essentially, they sent this rather lengthy letter with 16 footnotes. in the case of the letter to AT&T, they're going after all of the major providers, and they are asking questions. We're just asking questions, they say.
Well, yeah.
But they want to know what these cable companies plan to
My
do
goodness.
about these dastardly news organizations that are that have a place on the cable company's menu. And they are asking things like what moral or ethical principles, including those related to journalistic integrity, violence, medical information, violence.
Oh my goodness.
Medical information and public health do you apply in deciding which channels to carry or when to take adverse actions against a channel. They want to know what are the content guidelines, and they want a copy of the guidelines. How many of your subscribers tuned into Fox News, Newsmax, and OANN on Uverse, DirecTV, and AT&T TV for each of the 4 weeks preceding the November 3rd, 2020 elections and January 6th, 2021 attacks on the Capitol? Please specify the number of subscribers that tuned into each channel. What steps did you take prior to, on, and following the November 3rd, 2020 elections and the January 6, 2021 attacks to monitor, respond to, and reduce the spread of disinformation, including encouragement or incitement of violence by channels your company disseminates to millions of Americans? Please describe each step that you took and when it was taken.
Is there a step that's, hey, can you stop punching yourself in the face as well? And when did you stop beating your wife?
There's something I want to add.
Yes, exactly. This is when you stop beating your wife.
Right.
Have you taken any adverse actions against a channel, including Fox News, Newsmax, and OANN for using your platform to disseminate disinformation related directly or indirectly to the November 33rd, 2020 elections, the January 6th, 2021 Capitol insurrection, or COVID-19 misinformation? If yes, please describe each action when it was taken and the parties involved. Have you ever taken any actions against a channel for using your platform to disseminate any disinformation? Yes, please describe each action and when it was taken. And by the way, are you planning to continue carrying Fox News, Newsmax, and OANN on Uverse, DirecTV, and AT&T TV, both now and beyond any contract renewal date? If so, why? Hey, nice cable network you have there. Be a shame if something happened to it.
There's a couple things I want to add in here. First, number one, shout out to Ayana, who goes on to state, they want truths in news like there used to be regulations for. Yeah, truths. Yeah, that is absolutely correct. Gamer for Life states, at least Tucker has some progressives on here and there, and that's the truth about Fox News. When it comes down to the major media outlets, compared to CNN, MSDNC, ABC, CBS, Fox News has had outspoken progressives who talk about very controversial subjects that the other corporate media outlets won't talk about. And I just find it really odd that, okay, now they're going after Fox News and all these other conservative outlets. Who is to say this doesn't stop? Because as soon as you start censoring one person, everyone's on that damn chopping block.
It's already happened.
Yeah,
it went from AOC telling people to tattle on social media accounts and hashtags within a matter of weeks. Now we've got representatives, members of Congress, who are trying to strong arm cable companies over which the federal government does have some regulatory control through the FCC. Now,
Ehler wants to ask you a question. Who wrote this letter again?
Who wrote the letter was Anna G. Eshoo and Jerry McNerney. You can find the letter. There's a link right to the PDF in the show notes. I've also got a lot of references in there for you folks because I want you to be doing your own research. I was just doing my usual work this afternoon, going over regulatory sites, trying to find some nice stories to share with all you good people. And then I find this. Now, yesterday, there was actually a hearing regarding this. As I understand it, Representative Eshoo felt that that her rights were being violated, but other people, academics and whatnot, who were on the panel, who included Soledad O'Brien, who did call out Russiagate conspiracy theorists.
That's new.
Yeah, but who basically said, look, we have to watch this. We have to be very, very careful. I don't like disinformation. Okay, I don't like the fact that we have had a global health crisis that in this country was horribly politicized to the point that specific preventative health actions taken depended on who you voted for in the last election. I don't like that at all. None of this is making me happy. But when you've got this kind of strong-arm tactic going on in a country that has long been known for its free press. Has there been bad press? There's been horrible press in this country. There's been, we've exposed it all the time
Yep,
on this
we
show.
do. We talk about it all the time.
But I know what I believe, and I know what these guys believe, is that the cure for disinformation, or the best offense against disinformation, is more good information.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, we have a situation where there are some real ugly precedents taking place here. You can say as a congressperson, I have a concern about this. And I think that that's realistic. I think you can speak that way. But when you start leaning on, in one case, your campaign donors, and then you start leaning on cable companies, that's getting kind of serious. Now, I'm going to say this. There is a Republican commissioner on the FCC, a Mr. Carr, who is incredibly angry at this point. And in fact, you can go to the FCC website and you will actually find his take on this, and that he believes that this is a form of censorship. Now, I think he is slightly overstating his case here, because I think that this letter was written with plausible deniability in mind. Remember, we just recently had a president who was a master at that, so I think some people have been learning some skills. But I am going to say that I think that Mr. Carr, Mr. Commissioner Carr, is correct on this issue, that these representatives have overstepped their bounds. They really have overstepped in this instance, and I am getting very concerned, because keep in mind that these are the cable companies. These are the means of dissemination of content. And we've been talking about how social media, which is not federally regulated, is the means for disseminating content. When you cut people off, you're cutting people off from a major source of information, news, and journalism in this country. Now we're moving into the cable TV companies. A lot of people, in fact, I would probably say most people in the U.S., their TV is through cable. They don't have antennas. And yes, there are free airwaves that you can get in for with a $35 antenna. You can hook that up to your TV and get a lot of local broadcast channel. But many people don't have that. They don't know how to use it. They don't remember how to use it. I don't know about you guys. Do you remember a time before you had cable?
I remember when we had bunny ears.
Yeah, bunny ears.
Yeah,
Okay.
I remember the rabbit ears. Yeah.
You remember the rabbit ears? Okay. Well, just wanted to check, because there are a lot of youngsters that don't have any real memory of that, and then they don't have that kind of television. They don't have the bunny ears, and they don't really necessarily have access to the kind of free broadcast media that still exists, and that is in many cases still thriving. This is really disturbing, and I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention, because this is something that is escalating. We need to keep our eye on it.
Yeah, so in a lot of cases, a lot of times when these things happen, for me at least, and I think for a lot of us up here, the how you do something is maybe the most important aspect. Like what you're trying to accomplish, you can have one goal and then do it 5 different ways, 2 of which are horrible, 2 of which are good, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the biggest issue I have is how they're specifically targeting Fox. It's a political attack. It's nothing new in America. That's all we live in right now is my party's good, your party's bad. Oh, look, we're just playing football. Let's have fun. Except the other team is bad on the very fact that they're not my team. So it's a big worry, because if you have reps on the Democratic side, and we know Democrats don't ever go for the kill the same way Republicans do, and we also know Republicans are likely to take control of at least part of the government starting in 2021 in the midterms, maybe the Senate as well, likely maybe both, we'll see. If you, as Democrats, put this in and it does succeed, and you're able to knock out Fox, what's going to happen when the Republicans take over, and you've just given them a juicy precedent to take over. And then on top of that, my issue is that how they're being targeted. Like, if she had gone in and written this letter and it wasn't specifically to a specific cable company, but maybe all of them, and or maybe government said, hey, maybe we should, I don't know, not allow media companies to operate if they're part of a conglomerate that's worth over, I don't know, $1 billion. Maybe that'll help break things more. Or maybe they go and say, hey, the news is clearly getting out of hand. It is being way too consolidated in its power and organization. We've seen this and how that's shown in the last election and the election before that. We should break up all these big cable companies into smaller cable companies. That's a way to deal with this issue that you're dealing with. But no, they're saying this particular group, these people, I don't like them.
And here's the thing too that we need to remember. And Daniel, to your point about the Democrats not even noticing that if 2022 happens the way we were thinking it's going to happen with the Republicans taking over the Senate and House, the Democrats lack the, I guess, foresight to see that the Republicans can use this on them. They're willing to have a short-term victory and not understand the long-term consequences of that short-term victory. Because that's the problem with the Justice Democrats and a lot of these Democrats that are in power. They think that because they defeated the orange man, that now people are just going to want to continue to trust the Democrats, but the Democrats haven't really delivered on much. I'm going to say this, for example, I'm really impressed with what they're doing with net neutrality in California. We'll see if there'll be continued follow through, but also to Laney's point too, when you covered how the Biden administration is handling, with the food situation, food crisis with people so they can have access to, buy food. I mean, that's something, but again, let's look at all the other promises that the Democrats have backpedaled on, forgotten about, or not even going to address at all. The Democrats don't understand that as soon as they start pushing this kind of narrative, once the Republican establishment is in charge, and remember, the DNC and RNC are friends with each other, everyone. Once the RNC is in charge, the Republicans will just come down harder on these institutions. And that's why I'm saying I am for free speech. And that means, Fox News. Fox News should be around, but this kind of crazy censorship that we're seeing cheerleaded by the Democrats will only backfire on them, which is why we need to have we really need to the Democratic Party needs to really step away from this before they invite themselves to further ruin.
Well, I also want to point out the optics on this. We are living in a time, at least in the U.S., where faith in institutions is at an all-time low. People don't trust the media. They don't trust the medical industry. They don't trust the schools. They don't trust their government. They do not trust law enforcement. And a lot of the conspiracy theories that are going on right now are the result of this lack of trust. Now you've got the optics on this one. You have got a couple of representatives getting together and leaning with plausible deniability on cable companies who aren't even producing this content, they're just hosting it. And they're specifically targeting conservative news networks. How does this look? In fact, the Breitbart, the conservative outlets are having a field day with this at this point. We've got an FCC commissioner who is up in arms. I can't say that I honestly blame him. Now, I probably don't have much in common with this commissioner or many of these outlets, but this is the optics right now when you're trying to put the squeeze on media at a time when there are rampant conspiracy theories due to a lack of faith in institutions and the belief among many that the public is being manipulated by elite forces, and you're just going to put the further squeeze on certain news outlets. This is not good. And it's only going to make matters worse.
Yeah, and this is the other thing that I think is sort of a weird cornerstone. And it's weird, not that it's a weird cornerstone that we're talking about, but it's weird that we're one of the few media organizations that are talking about it in this way. They're just, it's like someone has internal bleeding and they're like, we need a Band-Aid. This is how we fix this problem. And that's all this is. This is a situation where America is just quite simply falling apart at the seams. We're being overtaken by China economically, influence. The EU is becoming increasingly independent of us. Russia still isn't really doing that much, but we're still making them the main enemy because why not? all these things are happening. America has basically sold out its manufacturing base over decades. The life expectancy of Americans is going down. All this is another generation of politicians who we were supposed to elect in to not be this way, but are simply looking at short-term, what's happening in the next 4 year changes, whereas we're looking at stuff that's going to take us decades to get out of if we decided to go full force and try and fix it, whether that be climate change, whether that be infrastructure, whether that be public housing, or whether that be the way that we conduct jobs, whether that be the way we conduct banks. And so all we're seeing are Vietnams. This is just Vietnam. This is just Vietnam and nothing else. This is the main issue that is affecting Americans. And then there are these little, and I mean like the entire media fight that we're seeing is in reality a small little offshoot from this main body that is an effect of this, and that's what we're focusing on. We're focusing on this little media conglomerate thing in relation to everything else, and saying this is the issue. This is how we stop it. Right. It's a symptom, just like Trump was. It's not the cause.
Can I add one more thing in here real quick? It has to do with AOC telling people to tattle. Whenever you see someone do that, ignore them. No one likes a snitch. No one likes someone that's going to rat somebody out, because I think it's BS. And I think that's a lot of weak energy for AOC to tell her followers, well, now you must become the political police. No one likes that. No one respects that. Oh, I'm telling, whatever. It's a bunch of crap that I'm seeing from the Democrats, and AOC going down that pathway of, oh, be sure to tattletale. Hey, AOC, the kids are still in cages. Why don't you worry about that right now? Why don't you go ahead and hold a rally down south by the border and hold the Biden administration accountable for the fact that they're now putting kids still in cages, but they've just been renamed. Instead of cages, they're temporary facilities, housing facilities. Yeah. AOC, follow through on that instead of worrying about creating your little political police force online.
Absolutely. Again, we'll keep monitoring this, but it is incredibly, it's incredibly disturbing. And as Daniel points out, we've got a whole lot of other concerns in this country. You know, it's funny. I was recently watching a show by Kim Iverson, who was of Vietnamese descent, by the way, and who has, does not have any particular love for the Chinese government. But she pointed out in her video that the communism comes to the U.S., or at least communism with Chinese characteristics, it will not come the way we think. That what's going to happen is that our decidedly capitalist system or neoliberal system allows other governments, other countries, such as China, to come in and buy up stuff, like buy up land, buy up buildings, and if communism comes to the U.S., it may come in the fact that we've allowed ourselves to be bought up by a communist country. And
and even on top of that, we've already seen examples of this in real time. You have the NBA with what happened with them just a few months ago, or about a year ago at this point, where if you say anything about the wrong things, it's like, oh, wow, China's going to boycott. Because exactly to Lena's point, it's not just that they're able to come in and buy everything, which is, by the way, what they're already doing. There's a huge amount of land and properties that have already been and are continually purchased by the Chinese government and people in China.
And I have nothing against the Chinese people. I have nothing against the Chinese people.
Nothing against them specifically, but it's the idea that we have set ourselves up to fail in an era where the way that China has organized themselves, it seems to be, at least compared to the U.S.'s current system, working a lot more efficiently at getting things done. And then on top of that, so it's not even that they're able to buy into the U.S., it's that now because of capitalism, the U.S. wants to sell stuff everywhere, and China's a gigantic market, especially since the standard of living has been shooting up in China. And so they're like, man, wouldn't it be really nice if we could double our NFL ratings or our NBA ratings or our Blizzard video game ratings by investing in China, which of course comes with strings attached of what China wants and does not want. So it's from both ends. They're coming in and buying our stuff, and they're buying our land. And again, nothing against them doing it, just a reflection on this is the government we built.
Yep. And it is. And we again, with our media system, are we really, we've allowed the monopolization of how people get their media. We've allowed things to be snatched up, and which makes them very easy to go after, either at the consumer level or at the regulatory level. And it makes it far easier to knock out media sources because of the rampant capitalism that has allowed that kind of these monopolies to occur, to take place. And I have to think again that a real nationalism, the idea of supporting your own country and your own people, whether you like that idea or not, should not be about waving flags and getting upset about insurrectionists and violence, but it ought to be looking at your resources, maintaining, growing those resources, and taking care of your own people.